the opening chapters of Reanimal, I kept wondering, why isn't this just called Little Nightmares? Because that's exactly what it felt like. The formula seemed largely unchanged from the studio's last two games, Little Nightmares 1 and 2. You're still hiding and running from grotesque creatures, still traversing a dark world full of incomprehensible horrors, still solving light puzzles. But unlike Little Nightmares, this is a cooperative experience at heart that follows a different structure and offers spectacle on an entirely different scale. The bottom line is, while many elements are familiar, Reanimal gradually morphs into its own distinct shape. The game is only 4 to 5 hours long, so I will only show footage from the first 1 to 2 hours and try to keep the review as spoiler-free as possible. But before we get into that, hi, I'm Jerry and welcome to my channel Shafsin, where I like to talk about a variety of different video games and video game related topics. I also like to provide reviews over on Backlogged to share my thoughts and experiences with the games I play. If you're interested in any of that, I'd be glad to see you stick around. But now, let's get started. Reanimal sees you playing as a brother and sister who go through hell to rescue their friends and escape an island that used to be their home. The game starts out with a brother riding a boat on a vast ocean, following red lights to the island's shoreline, when he finds his sister in the water and drags her aboard. After a brief moment where she assaults him, they settle down and set off on their journey. Soon after landing on the beach, they find one of their friends and start following him to find the others, as the horrors of the island unfurl before them. Unlike Little Nightmares, which told its stories without any dialogue, the kids in Reanimal actually speak to each other. This is one of the ways in which the game sets itself apart, but it's the least successful change, for the dialogue never amounts to anything more than light observations about the children's situation. Just like Little Nightmares, this is a story that primarily works with its evocative and often grotesque imagery to convey its meanings. This time though, the horror rarely comes from twisted versions of humans, but rather grotesque animals of various kinds. You've probably seen the big sheep on the cover, that's one of the big ones of course. But there are more surprises here in that I don't want to spoil. As always, the designs of these creatures are outstanding, and while I found the overall experience of Reanimal less scary than that of the Little Nightmares games, it still goes to some wonderfully twisted lengths with its foes. There were several moments that had me and my friend audibly gasping as we escaped the jaws of yet another distorted version of a usually peaceful animal, and you always wonder, why has it become like this? Reanimal's opening chapter sees you running from a hunter-like creature through a forest, not unlike the beginning of Little Nightmares 2, but from this familiar territory the game eventually reveals its setting of a war-torn country, reminiscent of the First World War. The game's critique of war is obvious at every turn, yet it runs much deeper than I expected and left me with many moments and images that I keep turning over in my mind to find new implications. This could make the game quite replayable, as there are plenty of details here that can easily be missed on a first playthrough. While Reanimal retains some of the larger-than-life and fantastical elements of the world of Little Nightmares, it also grounds itself much more in reality through its many references to one of the darkest periods in recent human history. The game utterly nails its atmosphere, as every new level manages to feel larger than life, like an uncaring world that towers over and threatens to crash down on you. Particularly towards the end, Reanimal starts firing on all fronts to deliver one of the most epic spectacles I've seen in a game of this size in a long time. Clearly, the studio's budget has increased since its last two games. This is not just evident in Reanimal's production value, but also in its expanded gameplay. Co-op is integral to this experience, to the point where I could not imagine playing this solo. The option to play with an AI companion is there for those who need it, but so many of the game's best moments rely on coordinating with a friend, and they would all be lost if you played alone. Thanks to a Friends Pass, which allows a second player to jump in for free, and even the option to play it in offline co-op, the hurdle to play together is quite low, which is nice. Apart from the usual sections where you run away or hide from the creatures that hunt you, or find your way forward through light puzzle and platforming sections, there are some new gameplay additions too. For example, you can now use vehicles on several occasions, like the boat that you can use to traverse some of the game's more open-ended levels. Speaking of which, Reanimal sees you returning to the waters multiple times, and while the game is still linear, it does create a strong sense of place by connecting multiple areas back to the start. And to the game's strength, this makes it feel less like a long theme park ride and much more like an actual journey. Another new feature is that you can actually keep some melee weapons on you, which you can use to kill, well, a lot of seagulls among other things, which killing seagulls is more satisfying than I like to admit. But you will also often find yourself in a position where one player has to steer a vehicle while the other person has to fend off enemies. Combat in general is a much bigger part of this game than it ever was in Little Nightmares 2. It's hardly any deeper and definitely easier, but it's a lot smoother and even allows for the occasional boss fight. The set pieces are mostly familiar in their structure if you've played Little Nightmares, but they are so much more jaw-dropping here because of how destructible the environments are, as every splinter of wood or piece of brick crumbles under the rampage of the monsters that chase you. These moments have always been nerve-wracking, but it's hard to understate just how much this level of destruction contributes to the intensity of these chases. Between its expanded exploration, set pieces, traversal and combat mechanics, as well as the coordination it requires in co-op, Reanimal offers a lot more variety in its gameplay than Little Nightmares, which is ultimately why it feels so different to play. There is an argument to be made that at a length of around 4 hours, the changes still aren't impressive enough to warrant a price tag of $40 or euros, and that some sections are just too short, and I would agree. At the same time, it's a tightly paced adventure that never overstays its welcome and beckons to be replayed. Whether or not the standard price is worth that is a question you will have to answer for yourself. As a big fan of Little Nightmares games, I was naturally inclined to feel excited for Tarsier Studios' next offering and the promise of something new. In Reanimal's opening hours, however, it felt the same, and I felt like the formula might be running stale, and that it wasn't different enough to justify being its own IP. But as the deeply cooperative nature of this game, its different thematic focus and hugely expanded gameplay unfolded before me, I started to see the studio's vision, and by the end, I was more than satisfied. And that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of Reanimal, if you're playing it or planning to buy it. I very much look forward to reading your opinions, and I hope to see you again next time. Take care.